it's an interest of mine as well. Only 18% of our shoreline in Nova Scotia is publicly accessible. Um, and and I think making sure that people have access to the coast is critically important. It's part of our tourism. Having public access public transportation to beaches would improve the quality of our destination and opportunities for people visiting here. It's for people who don't drive, either because they, perhaps have an accessibility issue or because economically they can't afford a car. Provides opportunity to get out of the city and experience the ocean and the beach and have recreation opportunities that right now are only available to those with cars. And I think it's about, just the quality of life of living in our city. It's one of the, kind of our unique and special assets in this municipality is having beaches and access to the ocean. I have Crystal Crescent on my side, and I get lots of requests for buses for people in Spryfield just to get to Crystal Crescent. It's not that far away. People don't have cars. We're promoting, development without parking, not to accommodate cars. So, what are people's options? I'm just wondering, have you, in your research in this, have you looked at any other places, any other municipalities that run public transit services to beaches or to, other similar, maybe in some places it might be a mountain trail, depending on where you are in the country, but do you have any examples of services like this in other places?
Fortunately, I don't. Just anecdotally, I know that in BC, Vancouver and Victoria, that you can take buses to either trailheads or beaches. But I don't have any, I didn't do any of that research myself.
Right. Well, I know Councillor Purdy did bring a motion forward about this before, and I think it wasn't it was recommended. I can't remember. It wasn't recommended, but it wasn't funded. Maybe Councillor Purdy can talk to that. I see she's up next. But again, thank you for coming and speaking with us today. I think it's a great idea.
Next up would be Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for this, Andrea. Yes, we did pass a motion there a couple of years ago to look at a pilot project, but it was kind of a faulty motion, so we actually got rid of it, and Councillor Cleary and I thought of actually something very similar to what you have suggested here, so he's going to come forward with a notice of motion at the end of the meeting to look at this again, a renewed pilot project to see how this would go, because absolutely our beaches and our trails, didn't even think about that, but of course it's right there for folks without cars to be able to access. I think of moms staying home with their kids who maybe don't have a vehicle, and I mean this would be a full day of fun and enjoyment for the family, right? So to be able to offer this, I think is not only something that we should do, that's a good thing, but I think it's kind of our obligation as a municipality, right, to make sure these places are accessible to all of our folks. So thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward. I absolutely agree with you, and I love this idea, and we will be working towards it.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also, Ms. De Silva, for coming. Good presentation. And to echo what some of my colleagues have said, it's important for us as we develop more publicly accessible recreational areas, whether they're indoor or outdoor. I think of the Shaw Wilderness Park, for example. You can get on the number 25 bus, you can go into Governor's Brook, you can get on to a trail, and now that we own the land finally, yay, you can walk on municipal land from there all the way down to Williams Lake, and if you want to come down the Williams Lake Road, although it doesn't go all the way there most of the day, but you can short little walk to the parking lot, which is funny. We have a parking lot. So we have these recreational assets and people can drive their car to it, but if you want to get there by public transportation, it becomes increasingly difficult at some of these locations. And so I fully appreciate that. But just if you could, I'm not sure if you sort of articulated it, but why are you passionate about this? Why do you think this is a good idea for us? I
think outdoor recreation proved, especially during COVID, that outdoor recreation or access to the outdoors is so important both physically and mentally. And when we meaning we as a city, we don't allow access for monetary reasons, accessible reasons, and I think we're saying there's us and them. And I think we want to see Halifax as one city that offers access, one city that offers access for all. It doesn't matter your economic status or doesn't matter your accessibility. You have the choice of a car, that's not going to be taken away, but you will also have the choice of a bus. Right now, there is no choice. And I think council can come forward with a novel idea and say, we have a bus and it's only for recreation. Yes, we're giving you a bus for transportation to work or transportation to school, but now this is a bus only for recreation, to trails, to beaches. What a novel idea.
And Councillor Cuddle has sort of mentioned this a number of times, especially now post sort of the COVID era lockdowns. We've seen a drastic difference in the way people use our buses and for the purpose they use the bus. And most of our bus routes are set up for commuting. So we think about jobs. People want to go from their home area to a job. But what we've seen now post-COVID, if you look at the ridership from 2019 till now, and this has been true for the last couple of years, we have more people riding on the weekends than we did in 2019. We're about the same now as people riding weekday as we were 2019. And so why is it we got so many people riding on the weekends? Well, clearly not all of them are working. Some of them might be, but they're shopping, they're recreating, they're doing other things. And I think now that we think about the accessibility of our city, you're right. We need to think about all those recreational activities and how we get people around there. So I really want to thank you for coming in and talking about this with us.
Thank you, Councillor Clary. There's no one else on the board, so I thank you very much for coming and sharing your input with us today. And you've heard two councillors are very much interested in this, so we'll see if we have a motion in future at this committee. Thank you for sharing. Next up, we would have Douglas Whitmore. It's more than buses. Looks like it's a team sport today.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
So we're here to chat about reading transit by the numbers. How can better data improve our transit service in the city? So who are we and why are we here?
Yes, so my name is Douglas Wetmore. I'm here representing the volunteer-based group It's More Than Buses, advocates for public transit in HRM.
And I'm Ben Hammer with the Ecology Action Center. We've been around for over 50 years as a watchdog, convener, mobilizer, and incubator to address complex systemic issues in the face of environmental change.
So what we were hoping to come here today to discuss was the upcoming budget and service plan for Halifax Transit. I don't think I need to explain why we need service increases and additional service coverage, but the truth of the reality is that we can't talk about those today without addressing other important concerns first. There is serious concern surrounding staffing and resourcing with Halifax Transit right now. And before we circle back to the conversation about increasing service and improving our network, we need to address what is happening with staff and get these resources under control first and foremost. The nice thing is we already have a bit of a framework, as seen in this PowerPoint. We're already doing work towards making transit operators feel safe, trying to push that forward, but it's essentially time to start walking the talk.
It's encouraging to see the resourcing that's gone into the Transit Code campaign, but beyond advertising, how can we learn from what other agencies are doing to improve safety and reliability with data? Mm-hmm. So the TTC reports offenses against employees on a regular basis. So for every 100 employees working over the course of a year, what is the rate of reported harassment and assault against employees, as well as time lost injury rates. And they don't just cover it for their staff, but also for their customers, both injuries and offenses. And so lessons we can take from the TTC are that if you want data to be accessible, intuitive, and digestible and put into action, it needs to explain what is being measured, how it's being measured, what the target is and why, what trends exist in the data, what does the data mean, and how will it inform action. So you can see in the graph there that over the time that the TTC has been reporting the rate of offenses against customers per million boardings, they've recently achieved or exceeded their target of having no more than one offense against customers per million boardings. So they can point to the data and say that every time you get on a TTC vehicle, you have less than a 1 in a million chance of being harassed or assaulted. So if data makes transit better, let's make data better.
Yes. So speaking to a little bit about this slide here, this is a wonderful example of how Montreal's transportation agency highlights a lot of the work that is, or not work, but statistics and what that means. The one we really wanted to highlight is on the blue section there at the bottom. They highlight that they have 87, what's essentially the equivalent to our Access A bus. And they highlight how many passengers that serves and how many trips that means per year. So you have very direct examples of what these resources are being put towards and what that impact is.
These infographics provide a sense of what service is delivered with what resourcing is available. So if staff matter, then measure them. I want to commend Halifax Transit on being one of, if not the first transit agency in Canada to report staffing metrics. It's very encouraging. But the way it's reported, the total out does not tell the full story. It includes operators transferring to other internal positions. It includes operators aging into retirement. It includes operators leaving Halifax Transit for other employment opportunities, as well as operators dying prematurely. It's nice to have data, but data without enough context creates confusion, and confusion does not lead to action. Perspective also matters. So on the left here is from the 23-24 Halifax Transit year-end report, the share of stops that meet accessibility standards. The way the pie chart is presented at an angle, it distorts that 1 in 20 stops are not accessible by any stretch of the imagination. 1 in 4 are kind of accessible but don't meet standards, and it overinflates that only 7 out of 10 stops meet Halifax Transit's accessibility standards. Perspective also matters when it comes to things like mapping. Here's the map of overloads reported in the quarter being presented by Transit Today. It doesn't show the entire network of routes, but it shows enough of a picture to show that overcrowding isn't just an issue in the regional center, but it's very visible on a number of corridors out into the suburbs.
So granularity of this data matters as well. One of the points we wanted to bring up is how Halifax Transit currently measures mean distance between failures to essentially measure the efficiency and maintenance of our fleet. That being said, we don't actually break that down by type of bus or by age group of bus. We are about to invest a good amount of money in extending the lifespan of 10 buses. It would be wonderful if we had those 10 buses measured separately so that we can actually measure how much of a difference this money is making towards those specific fleet. In addition to just monitoring the status of all of our fleet, how well are our older buses doing compared to newer buses? How well are our brand new e-buses that have hit the road performing in comparison to other buses? How well are our articulated buses, which are reaching the end of their lifespan, managing? This sort of data really helps us validate the decisions being made today and help guide us towards how we can make better decisions towards resource management down the road.
Mean distance between failures is measured by dividing the total distance traveled by the vehicle fleet over a given time by the number of vehicle failures over that same time to get a sense of how much mileage you can put on a vehicle before you can expect it needs a day at the depot to recover. It would be interesting to also see mean time between illnesses and staff. How many service hours can we expect from our operators before we can expect them to call in sick? Because it's a very draining job. So we have two asks.
First and foremost, we would like that the Transportation Standing Committee direct Halifax Transit to revise KPI reporting based on best practices. The TTC from Toronto sets a wonderful example of what incredible data reporting looks like. In addition to that, It's More Than Buses, in partnership with the Ecology Action Centre, the Halifax Transit Union, and any other stakeholders that would like to get involved, we would be glad to have conversations with Halifax Transit Management themselves on what sort of data we should be reporting and how we can set ourselves up for success and better reporting of a lot of the investments we're making. In addition to that, we'd also like to ask that the Transportation Standing Committee direct Halifax Transit to include necessary resourcing in the 2025-26 budget for more in-depth and intuitive data reporting, because we understand that better data isn't just going to come out of nowhere with the same amount of resources.
And we're not sure what that resourcing might look like because there seems to be enough graphic design capacity and reporting capacity. It's just a matter of organizing it and seeing if there are any gaps that need addressing to improve it.
And to conclude on some of these points, again, we were hoping to come today to talk about the state of the current transit network, how we can make things better for ridership, improve our service frequency, improve our coverage, improve on-time performance. But at the end of the day, we unfortunately can't have those conversations unless we have the resources to make these changes happen first, which is why we came today to ask for better data so that we can start prioritizing our staff and making decisions that will get us to where we need to go for HRM. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in and sharing with us today. Timely, given that we will be reviewing our KPIs. I don't see any questions on the board, so thank you very much for coming. So next up would be public participation, and I do have a very official taped note here of what I am to read, so we'll go with that. Next, we'll have public participation section of the meeting. So this is your chance to talk to us. Please keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed to me, the chair. The clerk will announce when you have 30 seconds with her high-tech sign, and when your time is expired, you'll see the red sign. Any member of the public who is registered with the clerk's office on this matter will be given 5 minutes. When I call your name, you may come up to the microphone. After everyone on the list has been given an opportunity to speak, I will call 3 times to ask if there are any additional speakers. Ms. Clerk, do we actually have anyone signed up? No. So we'll skip to the main part of I'll call now 3 times to see if there's anyone who would like to speak. Would anyone like to speak to our committee today? Would anybody like to speak to our committee today? Third and final call. Anyone wish to address us today? Okay. Thank you very much. So next would be information items brought forward, of which we have 2. And the first we'll go to would be 12.1, removal of traffic islands on Colby Drive. So this would be Councillor Purdy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'll just address the history behind this for the newer councillors to the Transportation Standing Committee, just to let you know where this came from. This all started, I mean, well, besides the unpopularity of the traffic calming islands, but this started because of a equity issue, really. One of the residents whose property is impacted by the island, realized that he would have to increase the cost of any driveway resurfacing pricing by the cost of traffic control, which would be an extra $1,000 to $2,000 depending on the quote. And his neighbor beside him, whose property is not directly impacted by the island, doesn't have to pay. So it is not an situation for the folks whose properties are directly impacted by these islands. In order to bring something like this forward, we needed a petition, and we need 75% agreement from the residents in the impacted area to agree to have something done. And the report says that I got 70 out of 78, but really I got 100% support, like zestful support, if I can use the mayor's words from this week. It was everyone was in support of this. Folks who don't live on Colby but use Colby Drive to get to their side streets all wanted to sign it as well. The only people who didn't sign were the folks that were not physically at home or didn't answer their door. I went out 4 times in 2 weeks to get signatures for the petition. So everyone I spoke to signed. Everyone was in agreement for this. So the Transportation Standing Committee through Councillor Cleary and Councillor Mason requested for more data, because what had originally happened was there was no, these islands were not effective in reducing traffic. The original data that was collected showed no impact to the traffic. And so someone who lives on the bottom of Colby has to drive through these traffic islands multiple times daily. I can attest it doesn't impact your speed. And with a house full of boys and teenage boys, when these islands were installed in 2017, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I mean, they were all, at the top of the hill, seeing how fast they could go down to the bottom with the traffic islands. Which of course they got a big lecture from their mother that is not appropriate, and we do not drive like that on the streets. The residents who live there, when I was collecting the signatures for the petition, had told me story after story, and these are anecdotal stories. I don't have any proof besides what the RCMP would have for their collision reports, but not everyone calls the RCMP when they, nick their tire on the side of an island curb and end up on somebody's front lawn. But this has happened many times, and we did have our resident who initiated the send in pictures, which we included for our correspondence back in the summer or late summer, I guess, of a car that crashed right almost in front of his house because they clipped the curb of the island, which other councillors on this committee have, perhaps rightly said, well, I mean, anyone speeding, that would have happened. And I would say, no, not necessarily, because a traffic calming table does not have a curb that your tire can clip on and lose control. So it is a totally different thing. The other things, I'm running out of time here. I'm going to put a motion on the floor because we're going to ask for a potential amendment to be allowed to Section 28B to allow.
Councillor Purdy, just sorry to wade in. Just the way we had to structure this, we're on the information report, so we're going to debate the information report. You can ask any questions of that, and then we'll go to your motion after. So, because they're technically 2 items, but they're related, so we put them next to each other on the agenda.
Okay, I think I had 30 seconds left. Can I just finish?
Oh yes, yeah. No, you can finish.
Sorry. So the other thing too, there's a residence with ill person in the house, and the neighbors were telling me just they have an island right in front of their driveway, and how the ambulance can get in perfectly fine but finds it very difficult to back out. We also have snow plowing, many snow plowing issues with these islands, and residents going out into the middle of the street to shovel what the snow plows have missed. I mean, these are just the daily frustrations of this. And these islands were put on the street without our knowledge of tables, without our knowledge of cushions, and they couldn't put the bumps on the street because it was a transit corridor at the time. So, I mean, our technology has come a long way. We should be very able to pivot with these things. And I won't be asking for this to be included in the 25-26 budget, but we'll talk about that later. So thank you for the indulgence of the extra more than 30 seconds.
No problem. So no one else is on the board. So that would conclude the information item. I would ask, well, actually, I'll ask when we are actually on your motion, Councillor Purdy. So we'll go next to 14.2. So we'll go back to Councillor Purdy for your motion.
Thank you. So I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report to amend Administrative Order 2021-005 OP, the Traffic Calming Administrative Order, incorporating amendments identified in the November 25th, 2024 information report submitted to the Transportation Standing Committee on January 23rd, 2025. So moved. Thank you.
A second by Councillor Cuddle. Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
So, thank you. So, the amendment that is proposed here adds I guess, a point B to the section 28 to allow traffic calming measures to be removed or replaced without the need to integrate it with the next recapitalization plan. So it allows council and staff and residents to be more nimble and to be able to pivot if needed or necessary. The data originally showed, and this is on page 3 of the report from April 25th, 2024, it showed that the installation of the median islands did not result in the desired reduction in vehicle speed. Now, they went back to take more data in different locations to see if maybe there were specific locations where perhaps it did impact the speed. And based on the data presented in Table 1, that would be on page 2 of that same report, apart from location 10, installation of the median islands does not appear to be providing the desired reduction in vehicle operating speed. So these islands are not working to the effect that they are supposed to be. A traffic speed table would be a much better implementation here to actually reduce vehicle speed on this. It is like a raceway because it's downhill, so it's easy for cars to speed up on that hill for the folks who live there. So residents don't want the traffic calming removed. They want it replaced. I am not prepared to ask for this to come to the 25-26 capital budget, but we will be having big recapitalization projects in my district very close to this particular location in the next few years. We have Astral Drive starting. It's going to be a 2-phase project this year. We have the second phase of Caldwell Road happening. So we're going to have the big equipment there anyway in the next few years. And I'll work with staff. If this passes, Roddy will come back with information. I guess we'll come back. We're asking for a report on the amendment to this, but I'd work with staff to make sure it would work with the capital budget. And of course, it would have to come back to council anyway to be approved. So if we approve this today, we're asking for a staff report, and any traffic calming would have to removal and replacement would have to be approved through the council budget process anyway. So it's not like we're saying this is going to be done on Colby Drive if we pass this motion today. It is an opportunity to pivot, to be nimble, and to respond to the needs of residents and to the changing best practice and the new technology that's coming out. I mean, speed cushions weren't even a thing a few years ago, but now we have an opportunity for our emergency vehicles to not be impacted by these traffic calming measures. So I just feel like it's incumbent on us to do whatever we can to be nimble in this area. So this is not a ask for any money this year for this at all. It is an opportunity to open this for a possibility in the next few years when we're already going to be having big contractors right in the area anyway, and I can work with staff to make sure it's going to work. And there may be other housekeeping amendments that need to be done while this AO is open anyway, and could come back possibly in a report if this is passed today to deal with the ever-changing circumstances that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Next up would be Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councillor Purdy, I know this has been a journey for you, and a bit of an evolution too. In understanding traffic calming and what works and what doesn't. I don't see this as being anti-traffic calming. I just see that in this case it was, the right idea with the wrong tool. And appreciate the unique circumstances that are particular to this road and these traffic islands. I think in the past we've used examples like Connaught that has medians down the middle, but it doesn't provide the same challenges with being able to have a moving van or being able to get an ambulance out of a driveway, or anything else like that, putting an extra burden on local homeowners. So, I appreciate that this doesn't have any budget implications. I saw in here, that something about a recapitalization. Colby Drive is not anticipated to undergo a recapitalization project for the next 6 to 7 years. I don't know if it's, I don't know about the timing of when this might happen and when it makes the most sense, but I think clearing the road to enable it to happen and replace it with something modern and appropriate and that works is the main goal here. The one concern I have is that in the report it says if traffic calming measures are removed from the street, and I guess we should even figure out if we call them traffic calming measures, are removed from a street in accordance with section 28, subsequent traffic calming requests shall not be considered for the street for a period not less than 10 years. And, I would think that's something staff might look at as well, that if a recapitalization is taking place in 6 to 7 years, that get waived if it's determined that putting in something like traffic, what are they called, cushions or pillows, are the more appropriate form, because it's during the recapitalization that would be integrated and most cost effective. So I'm going to support this to clear the way to make it happen, but with no commitment to when it might happen or what the best approach is to installing any future traffic calming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no issues with the potential amendment to Section 28. That was something that staff put in as a possible improvement. And I'm not worried about sort of the 10-year period, because once the traffic authority identifies speeding as an issue, it then becomes a safety issue, and it's just a matter of what's the best treatment. If you try something, it didn't work. And in this case, it's not that it didn't work per se. I mean, if you look at the locations, most locations, you didn't have an increase, or in a lot of them, you'd actually had decreases, -4, -3. Then you talk about whether you're within a margin of error or not. But anecdotally, it seems to have at least calmed it a little bit. Is it the 10 km/h reduction we would like to see? No. And in terms of the equity issue, I mean, within my district, whether you're on Oxford Street, Bayers Road, Quinpool, you've got a higher what do you call those folks? Traffic control personnel anyway, if you want to redo your driveway. So from an equity point of view, if anyone on Colby Drive wants to subsidize some of my residents on Bayers or Quinpool or even Almond Street to redo their driveway, because they all have to hire traffic control personnel anyway, that would be awesome. But the I guess when I look at this, because we don't often do this for councillor requests, but because this was something staff recommended, I wouldn't mind a comment from our Deputy Traffic Authority, if he wouldn't mind. Just in terms of this particular thing, looking at it, and obviously we're going to miss the window for this particular budget and construction year. Is this something that the AO would come back to us relatively quickly, and plans could be made in the next couple of years. And is there an ongoing monitoring of collisions in the area to keep an eye on that if there is a true safety issue? I mean, look, if you're hitting islands, you're a bad driver. We have lots of horizontal deflections in the right-of-way, especially around my district, curb extensions all over the place. I don't have any traffic islands per se, but I do have some mini traffic circles now. And people just drive over them. They're not hitting them, because actually it'd be awesome if they had curbs. I'd love to see people hit those. But anyway, just for our Director of Public Works, if you wouldn't mind, just giving us a sense of how confident you are that in the staff recommendation for changing the policy and the timing on and monitoring of collisions. We'll go with the other deputy.
Go ahead, Roddy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, as far as monitoring goes with regard to collisions and whatnot, that would we didn't take that information from any police reports and things like that as far as serious collisions. So we would have that all in our database. We'd be able to keep an eye on that for sure. As far as timing to get this back, I'll do my best to get it back as quick as I can. I don't like keeping reports on my plate. So I would anticipate we would have this back and ready in front of the council for their review and debate well before we get into next budget season.
And so for this one here, I guess, does it come back to TSC here, or is it just going to go straight to regional for amendment to the AO? Because I mean, there's no point in coming back. I guess if we pass it here now, we're saying go and change the thing.
I think
Just
it'll come
on
back to here.
clarity, yeah, sorry, we've removed the words Halifax Regional Council because it can come back to TSC. Now, if you want it to potentially bypass,
Then we have to
don't re- yeah,
recommend it go back to council anyway to change.
that's
the-
correct. And notice, yeah, you would go through the process of making those amendments.
Okay.
All good, Councillor Cleary?
Yep.
Awesome. I can't actually see you. You're just you're down there. There's a blind spot from the chair position here. Next would be Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering about how, if this is changed and we get other recommendations, would there be any more integration with pedestrian infrastructure? It's a bus route. There's a sidewalk only on one side. Is there any connection between what we're going to do there for traffic calming and the other infrastructure in the area for crosswalks or pedestrian safety, 40-kilometer-an-hour signs, that sort of thing? It just seems a shame to take something out, recognizing that it hasn't worked, but then what are we going to do that could be better and maybe more learn something from what's happened here for future standards?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So as far as active transportation infrastructure or sidewalk infrastructure goes, that would all be managed under our other capital programs. If there was a project going in to say build new sidewalks or do a recap, we would certainly then undertake any of the traffic calming work kind of in coordination with that. As far as these coming out, if you look at the report and the motion and what we're looking at, the intent here would be to allow the ability to go in and replace what's there. We wouldn't be looking to remove it and then not have anything there. That's not the intent behind the motion or the approach being taken here. So the islands would be removed and replaced. And to use an example, and actually Councillor Cleary would be very familiar with this, on Romans Ave. We went in a couple years ago and there was a major recap and there were the chicanes that were there that were determined that they weren't really working and there were a lot of complaints about them. So when that recap went through, the chicanes were removed and they were replaced with speed tables.
Right. Okay. But it just seems like more could be done with a bit more of a pedestrian focus because there wasn't much comment on that in the report.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, Active transportation and pedestrian infrastructure is again covered under other programs.
Okay.
The traffic calming program is specifically meant to address the vehicle speed issues on roadways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. If it's okay with everyone, I'll just comment briefly from the chair before Councillor Purdy closes. So I'll support this. Councillor Purdy, I think you've made a persuasive case regarding the situation there, and that the data on these they didn't quite work as we had hoped. And I'm sympathetic when I think about in my district, Joffrey Street, that was a traffic calming one. It had the highest speeds of any of the streets that we've ever measured in District 5. And we started off with curb extensions on Joffrey, and they made next to no difference in the actual speeds coming down the straightaway. They do still provide a benefit on that street. They're not the islands in terms of shortening the pedestrian crossing distance and slowing down the vehicles that are turning onto those side streets and turning off. But in terms of the vehicle coming down Joffrey, they really didn't make any difference. So, well, bit of a different situation, bigger street. We came along and we added speed bumps onto the street after, right? So it ended up becoming 2 traffic calming projects on the one street over 3 years. I don't think that this is really dissimilar. We tried something, it didn't quite deliver the results, and now it's go back and see what else we need to do here. So I will support you on this, and I don't know if I've sparked any movement to my side there, but if staff don't have any further comment, we go back to you, Councillor Purdy, to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Roddy, for your work on this and your help for the last little while. So just a couple of things. These islands were a pilot project only on a portion of Colby Drive. The rest of Colby Drive has speed tables. So the intention would be to just continue the speed tables, take these out, and just so that the whole Colby Drive has the speed tables. With respect to the cost of like traffic control, if this were impacting every resident, that would be a different story, but it doesn't. It impacts this house, and then the house next to him, and the house next to him don't have to pay the extra $1,000 to $2,000, but this guy does. And then the house here has to pay it, but the next guy doesn't. So it's not equitable. If it were to impact the whole street, that would be a different story. That this is just the people that this island impacts would be impacted for that. And Councillor Morris on the pedestrian concern. So another reason I wanted to put this through as well is staff are recommending recapitalization for Colby Drive for the next 6 to 7 years. I don't think it needs to be done that soon, quite honestly. Like it's in good condition. It's a great street. Like we can put that money to better use, in my opinion, with other streets in our district. But when it does come up for recapitalization, there's going to be like a whole engagement, from what I understand from staff, on sidewalks, pedestrian, like how could we do multi-use pathway, like to really up the ante on safety and pedestrian experience and safety on that street, because it's a high pedestrian area. So but that would come with the recapitalization, which I think 6 to 7 years is way too early. So that was the other reason for trying to push this through, because to get these removed and replaced quicker than the recapitalization. So thank you again, everyone, and for you all, Roddy and Lucas, for your help. Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we go to the question, it has been brought to my attention that the motion that you said when you read, you said staff report, but the motion as it was written on the agenda doesn't say for a staff report. So we just need a little friendly amendment here to change that, if we're on track with that, Mr. Lawyer. Okay, who was the seconder? Cuddle. So I'm assuming you're okay. So we'll consider that a friendly amendment to correct that. All right. If we want to call the question. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? That carries. Okay. So the next item would be Councillor Cleary, 12.2, adjustment to signs and signals on pedestrian main streets. Another information report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, for their report. So on this one, I guess my original motion, I was hoping for something more of a recommendation, because I said to look at adjustments to those signs and signals, not give me a report back on, well, here's what signs and signals do, and here's what they can do. So I guess a couple of questions I have for staff. When looking at some of the information in the tables, and of course, to refresh everyone's memory, this was on pedestrian-oriented main streets, which are places like Alderney, Barrington, Quinpool, Gottingen, et cetera, and they're defined within the center plan, the land use bylaw and policy. And because we're trying to get more people walking on these streets, we have rules around the kind of space you can have on those ground floors to create that activation and get more people walking. And there will be, with all the development we have on these streets, thousands more people walking on them. So specifically looking at something like, you mentioned LPI, so leading pedestrian intervals. And I believe on Quinpool, there's only one that I can think of, and that is Oxford and Quinpool. So what would be the factor that would make you look at adding more LPIs at other intersections along the street where they're controlled?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, for LPI, a lot of times what we'll look at is some of the collision patterns, and if there are a significant number of kind of left turn or right turn collisions associated with pedestrians, we would look at that. But we've also gone into some areas, and just where there tends to be a high volume, we could certainly consider putting in LPI. So if there are intersections along Quinpool that you'd like us to consider, in addition to the ones that have already been done, send us a note. We can certainly have a look at that.
Excellent. And another would be, and it's not mentioned in the report specifically because you really focused on those controlled intersections, but if you look at the mid-block crosswalks, for example, at Beach, at Preston, and between Vernon and Preston, or Monastery. So those are half stops, and the light is coordinated with the adjacent intersections. So for example, today, I'll play a little guessing game here for you. So today at 12:40, I was walking down Quinpool to get here, and I did the mid-block cross in front of the superstore, liquor store area. How many seconds do you think it took from the time I pushed it until I got the light? And you would know this because you guys have timed them. It was, Councillor Cuddle was close, it was about a minute. And so I guess my question to you is that a reasonable, on a pedestrian-oriented main street, is waiting a minute a reasonable pedestrian priority?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, depending on the area, I'm not going to say yes or no, it's reasonable, because it all depends on the area and the activity and the traffic and whatnot. But as far as the wait time for getting the walk light, and I know the two older half signals are 100%. They're in part of the coordination. The newer one that's up towards the Canadian Tire was not supposed to be included in the coordination. So if that's the one where you were waiting a long time, I can certainly check with the text to see if we can adjust it. But with regard to all three, we can actually pull them out of coordination, have them operate kind of independent of the coordination. So we can certainly actually make that adjustment so that it'll improve or reduce the wait time for for pedestrians to cross. We can certainly do that.
Yes, I know you can do it. I guess my question is more, what do I have to do to get you to do it?
Through you, Mr. Chair to the councillor, you just did.
Okay, excellent. To be fair, though, so I've been just doing this since Tasso was here, and it hasn't been done. So we'll chat again. I appreciate that, Roddy. And in all good fun, I really do appreciate all the efforts, and for Mr. McIntyre in particular. When I first became a councillor in 2016, I had 5 intersections I wanted crosswalks at, and it took me a little while to get them. But that mid-block where sort of Canadian Tire, the liquor store, superstore is, was the last one that I got, and that came around 2020. So it took me 4 years to get it, but it's been amazing. It's one of the things I get comments from people who shop on the street regularly. So I do appreciate all the efforts that have been put in the last number of years to make Halifax a safer place for pedestrians. We still got a lot of work to do, and we'll work together to get it done. But I do want to acknowledge all the work that you guys have done for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a quick question about, there was a recommendation to do more with zebra markings and pavement markings at intersections. I'm just wondering what's involved there, and it seems, relatively straightforward and relatively cheap to do this, so why don't we do more?
Through Mr. Chair to the Councillor, we are actually doing more. That's one of the line items in our capital program for the road safety improvements this year. So if you'll notice, some locations have already got the high-vis crosswalk markings done, and we've been picking away at them as part of capital program. So if they're going to go in and do some paving, then when they reinstate pavement markings, we require them to go back with the high-vis. And we've been doing some smaller standalone tenders on our own. And what we're doing is having them installed with durable pavement markings as well. So they'll last longer, especially through the winter. So they should maintain well through the winter. We should get a couple of years out of them. And the reason we want to go with the durables is because they are significantly more expensive, even with the paint. It's significantly more expensive to paint the crosswalk with the zebra markings. Obviously, there's a lot more paint. And it takes a contractor more time to do it. So if we can get in and do it with the durable markings, they don't have to be redone every year. So we are certainly moving forward with expanding that program.
And by expanding, can you give us some idea of the numbers in this year ahead?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Councillor, I don't have the exact numbers of locations at this point that I could provide, but we are looking at expanding. We were originally only doing RA5 crosswalks, but now we're going to move back into the intersections, and we're going to start using those locations to upgrade to high vis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this may give you a chance to show off a little bit, Roddy, but you put zebra markings in at a controlled intersection, Oxford and Quinpool, just in the last 2 years, I think it's been. And they do wear off quite quickly, and I know they've had to been repainted, so durable would be awesome. But can you, I don't know if off the top of your head you know this, or just if you can remember roughly the direction, maybe not the magnitude, but there were quite a few pedestrian near misses and collisions at that intersection, and that's one of the reasons why you guys looked at putting the zebra markings in there. What's been your experience with the zebra markings at that intersection in terms of, has it helped pedestrians feel and be safer?
Through Mr. Chair to the Councillor, well, I obviously can't speak to whether or not the pedestrians feel safer. I'm not on the corner asking the question, but I know we have anecdotally heard some feedback that the high-vis markings are certainly preferred. We did do some before and after studies to determine whether or not they help with reducing the near miss, the close calls, and they do, and that's why we're moving forward with expanding the program.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else on the board, so we'll move on to the next item, which would be Halifax Transit's 2024-2025 Quarter 2 KPIs. Yes. Would someone like to put the motion that we can have Patricia speak here rather than doing it after she's already done? Councillor Purdy, if you'd like to put the motion on.
Sure. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee receive the staff report dated January 23rd, 2025 for information and receive a presentation.
Second by Councillor Cleary. All those in favor? Aye. All right, Patricia, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Hughes. I'm the Director of Planning and Customer Engagement at Halifax Transit. Happy to be here today with the second quarter report. Just a little bit of background on these. We've been doing these for a long time. I think the original motion is 2013. They have changed a bit over the years. We've added things, we moved things around, displayed information differently. I expect we will continue to do so into the future to make sure that they're useful. For the newer members of TSC, these are all available on the website if you go to Transit and Plans and Reports to see the historical information. I'm here with the second quarter today. We are usually here every quarter. We missed Q1 last year because it hit right during the municipal election. So I have both Q1 and Q2 data here. So it's a little bit more confusing than when I'm normally here, and a couple of extra slides. So bear with me. We do always run a bit behind. So the quarter has to close and all the financial information closes, and then we get the report ready and bring it in. So we're usually looking back in time a bit with these reports. And as well, with what you'll see with the fourth quarter reports annually is there's also an annual report that summarizes the whole year. So you'll see those as well if you go to the website, and you'll see one when we hit Q4 this year. Final note before I really jump in is that we do tend to alternate between the directors at Halifax Transit who presents it. So it's my turn today, but you'll get to see a few of our friendly faces doing these from quarter to quarter. So we usually do bring the whole team in case there's questions, because the data pertains to everyone's teams. So with that, I'll jump in. To give context to the data, there were service changes during these periods. I just want to highlight what some of those were. So on August 26th, we had some service changes, specifically the Route 90 Larry Uteck had peak hour frequency increased. So with the bus there, the routes were every 30 minutes, they went to every 15 minutes. The Route 26 Springvale had a schedule adjustment, and the 57 Portland Hills was discontinued at that time. We also had routes servicing Scotia Square being rescheduled to adjust related to Cogswell detours. So we had detours put in place in June with the existing schedules, so the schedules were updated for August. Further to that, we had a number of routes that had running time adjustments more throughout the route. It wasn't related to Cogswell, but just overall needed to be rescheduled a bit. That was the Route 8, 9A and B, 21, 84, 90, and 401. So those all had some changes to try to improve schedule adherence. We also had some changes in November. The November 18th service changes. The Route 1 Spring Garden was a really big one. It was a long-awaited change, so that would run both ways on Gottingen Street. And the Route 10 was replaced with a corridor route, 10 ABC, with different branches. We also added service to new Route 192 Hemlock Ravine Express in Bedford, Larry Uteck area. Again, more service changes happened, I believe that's this week, February 24th. The Route 196 Basin View Express has been a long-standing route, but only operating with 2 trips in the morning and out in the afternoon, so we added service there. And we had some temporarily suspended trips from February 2023 that were reinstated just this week. As well, we have been running detours again related to Cogswell construction since December, so those schedule adjustments were made as part of this February service change. So to get into the quarterly data, I won't share much about Q1 because it is quite a bit in the past now. Q1 was April, May, and June of 2024. At that time too, just for additional context, we weren't running what we'd consider 100% service because we had reduced service back in February 2023, which wasn't reinstated yet. During this period, boardings were up 15% overall, and revenue was up 9% over the year prior. In addition, bus maintenance costs were 14% lower than the budgeted cost. And that's really the key highlights from Q1. Moving into Q2, which would have been July, August, and September of 2024. A bit of an interesting time period because July and August we see more summer travel patterns, whereas September is usually quite a busy month for travel. And we did have those service changes in August, which were partway through this period. So you see some of that reflected in the data, but not necessarily always evident. So boardings and revenue were up during this period by 8%. Or boardings were up 8%, revenue was up 12%. So typically, and if I were to go back 2 slides to Q1, typically boarding growth outpaces revenue growth. For a few reasons, boardings would count a person multiple times if they were transferring. It's a flip this quarter, and the reason is we did have that fare increase in September. So that's the reason why we had the higher revenue than boardings, which is a bit of an anomaly. So wanted to highlight that. This slide shows the locations where Halifax Transit vehicles were overloaded and unable to pick up more passengers. They're largely concentrated in areas with high service levels and where there is a fair bit of service, but still certainly more overloads than we would like to see. 83% of these were on corridor routes and 86% of them were during weekdays. Just a quick highlight on Accessibus, which provided 1% more trips in Q2 than compared to the previous year. And there's a breakdown there of the different the trips provided versus not provided or canceled. Again, in Q2, bus maintenance costs were 1% lower than the budgeted price. Fare revenue, I may go into a bit more detail on this slide, just because it's quite colorful and not necessarily intuitive. What we're looking at here is the purple is the percentage of fares that are collected on the new HFX Go app. So fares collected through the app peaked at 39% in July, and I guess that's as a percentage of total fares collected. The first line on the chart, the blue area, says non-discretionary programs. So those are the programs where a person isn't deciding whether or not to pay for transit at a given time. So they're in contractual obligations. So that's the U-Pass, E-Passes, different partner programs where it's not a person actively buying a fare. So that blue line gets a lot smaller in the summer when university students are largely out and there's a lot less U-Passes. The red line here is it says paper products, so that's tickets and passes that people were buying at retailers. And the green is cash fares, with the purple being the new app. So you can see where we're at 1 year since the app launched, the purple part with the HFX Go app has grown over time. Moving on to overloads, they've increased in Q2. September increases are responsible for most of this. 65% of the overloads on this slide for Q2 are really in September. And they're slightly below last year's, but still certainly much higher than historical norms. On-time performance in Q2 was 70%, well below the target of 85%. Some of the worst performing routes here were rescheduled in August to try to address some of those issues. And I would note that also the Route 1 and 10 were rescheduled then in November. We'll see how big of an impact those changes have going forward. However, we are finding that there are changes needed essentially constantly to accurately reflect the conditions. In the second quarter, a collision involving Halifax Transit vehicles occurred once every 19,700 kilometers driven, with a preventable collision every 33,900 kilometers driven. And my final slide, this graph shows information on the number of conventional bus operators entering and exiting Halifax Transit over the last year. This one's maybe not intuitive either, so just to try to follow maybe a little bit of traffic color coding here. So for each month, the green line is how many operators were coming into the system, being recruited. The red line is how many were leaving for any number of reasons, including internal transfers, retirements, etc. And so then the blue line is the net difference each month. So if you look at the blue line, you can see if we were up or down overall for the month. And that concludes the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. First up would be Councillor Cleary, and Ms. Clerk, he's got 5 minutes, of course. Just showing 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hughes. So some really good news in here, and also some not so great news, especially on the overloads and the time it's taking us to get through. So just a few questions. I'll start with Halifax Go. So you said that proportionally when students get into town, the Halifax Go share of boardings has gone down, but in absolute terms, are still the same number, more or fewer people using HFX Go, on a monthly or quarterly basis? Because I'm assuming that they're not, a bunch of people aren't using it and they go, oh, well, now I'm a student, I'm using my student pass. If they're using HFX Go, it's because that's how they purchase tickets. So I guess rather than just proportionally, in absolute terms, folks using HFX Go, that's still growing, I assume.
Is especially, I think, where we're in the first year, we've just seen the numbers continue to go up.
Yeah. And then in terms of on-time performance, and you know, getting through those. So you've made some adjustments to some routes. When you're doing your analysis, are there particular areas of the city? Because a lot of our routes tend to go through the same bottlenecks. So are there particular areas of the city where you can recommend to us or to public works staff and say, we need some help in these areas? Like, obviously, if buses are slowing down, that means everyone's slowing down. We know there are lots of choke points. So have you been able to, through your analysis, identify some of those choke points so that we can start addressing some of those if possible?
Yes, that's a great question. We definitely have. And I think that the last year has been interesting because so much has changed with Cogswell, and part of it is trying to match the schedules to be more realistic. But the teams have been looking at, mapping different areas, top 10 areas where we're getting clogged up the most, especially in preparation for our next service plan this year. It's something we're talking about every day, and I wouldn't be able to speak to the specific areas on the spot, but absolutely we're looking to see where's the most bang for your buck, I'd say, and trying to make improvements.
Yeah, because I would think if you have a spot where 3 or 4 or 10 routes go through, if you could fix that one area, then all of a sudden 10 routes have just gotten faster. And so that would be really important. For the overloads, because when transit was here and we did the budget just this past week or so, one of the issues we dealt with was adding the buses and the drivers, 10 new, I believe it was 10. And so what do you think the impact of those will be, and when, assuming we all pass the budget and it goes forward, when will those start impacting overloads and reducing them?
Great question. Certainly those would be intended to address overloads, reliability generally. And so I think it's still a bit of work to be done to see how they fit in, and if it's, double heading a trip or adding more frequency in between two trips, and what that looks like. But that would, a large part of the intent of those would be to deal with some of the demand pressures, specifically overloads. In terms of timing, I think, the earliest would be as part of the August service changes, which would be good timing because September is when we get a larger influx of passengers again. I think, though, what we'd have to do is what we have been doing all along is a bit of a measured approach to try to match our operator resources. So it may be split August, November, and onwards if needed. But I think what we had proposed would be around that time frame.
And I think, if we think about what we've just done at budget these last 2 weeks in particular, looking at the additional buses and therefore the additional drivers, getting HR resources, extra HR resources for transit. And even, we had a presentation earlier today, and I think Mr. Hammer had been here before talking about other aspects of transit and transit drivers and amenities for transit drivers. All of this, when I look at the number of drivers coming in, the number of drivers leaving, and I look at those last 2 quarters, and it looks like there's, unfortunately, a few more drivers leaving and not enough coming in. So, obviously it's going to take us a number of months to get those resources up in hard resources, but then the people as well, to make sure that we can get these issues dealt with. And I think we all agree that these are issues we need to deal with sooner rather than later. So I appreciate that, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Next up would be Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so here we are looking at kind of recurring issues or chronic issues that don't have any easy fix. And I appreciate that there's no easy fix, but I just want to note again that the 9A and 9B routes, that is the third highest used route of the system with 7,300 users a day. The number one, of course, is Spring Garden Road at 8,500. So I think that just shows how dependent the Spryfield area is on transit for numerous reasons. And, we also rank 3rd and 4th for reported overload incidents. So this is like a significant challenge for the Spryfield area, and certainly no solution to make it easier in the short term. But it impacts, I just want to, state again that it's about the riders and the impact it has on the riders. When I have people like 70-year-old men calling me in tears, crying because they just can't figure out how to get where they need to go on the bus because it drives by them on the sidewalk, or the woman who, takes an hour and a half to get to Bedford. These aren't just about transit, it's about livelihoods, it's about quality of life, it's about the importance of mobility. So these for me are very important numbers and critical numbers. This is a very critical issue for my community. I'm wondering, when we look at that map that you have that was presented earlier that shows the bus overloads, and we have the heavily loaded corridors there on something like Spring Garden Road. We know that there's dozens of buses that travel down that road on different routes. So if there's an overloading incident, there's an opportunity probably within minutes to get onto another bus. Where on the Herring Cove Road, if a bus is overloaded, there's not the same opportunity to get on another bus. And, I think to the point of, that the data shows, what the data shows is as good as the data that we collect, to the point that was made this morning. When it comes to that overloading, like some more granularity in that would be useful to understand what's the opportunity cost here, really, if there's no other bus coming. It's like if you miss the bus at Mumford for Purses Cove Road, you have to wait an hour for the next bus. And, it's just, and then we wonder why the numbers go down. Luckily, those numbers are staying kind of steady. But, it's, death by 1,000 cuts kind of scenario. When something doesn't work for people, they're not going to use it. I guess, if there was some way to further break down that data for Herring Cove Road, 9A, 9B, that would be useful to see, to be able to kind of dig a little deeper into the issue. And that's all for now. If you have any comments about that.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'll take it away and see what we can do. And I mean, certainly we know that there are, for example, one of the reasons for overloads is if we had a bus breakdown and there's been no bus in a while, and then there's, potentially twice as many passengers waiting, it gets overloaded quickly. So I think we should be able to look and see, maybe we can look at some of the common causes and look at that. I would also say, related to some of the challenges that passengers are facing, I think the data does tell part of the story, but not all of it. And I would definitely encourage anyone to call 311 with their information. If a bus has passed by, the tree branches sometimes grow past the bus stop signage, and it's harder to see, and we don't know that, and we need to so we do want to have that context of what people are experiencing so that we can rectify it. Sometimes perhaps there's a street light out or something of that nature so we do want to look into that and hear more from people to make sure we're understanding what the challenges is. So I will put in a plug that we do want them to call 311 and report those experiences to give us the context and see if there's anything we can do.
Yeah, some more focused effort might be needed there. I think people call 311 and don't see any impact of calling 311 to report issues. As well, you're dealing with in an equity-deserving community here. Not everyone has cell phones. Not everyone's going to do that. You might need to do some outreach work rather than put the expectation on the users. In this case, it is a unique scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Patricia. I just wanted to ask a little bit more on overloads, but specifically about Crosstown Route number 3, because that seemed to stand out in the data. So if you can say a little bit more about what's going on there, if it's been addressed at all since then. And I'm just looking for a little bit more understanding about what's going on with our on-time performance, especially with the express routes. It seems Very few of the suburban express routes are meeting their on-time targets. I'm wondering about the safety collisions. Could we have a measurement so that we can see how we're comparing with other urban transit systems in Canada? And also, I'm just looking for a comment on the suggestion of reporting incidents involving staff and passengers for transparency.
Okay, I think I'll start with the overloads on the 3. I would have to go and check that, and maybe I'll do that and send an email specifically where it's getting tied up. I'm not certain off the top of my head today, so I'll check into the 3. With the express routes, I think they are challenged, and I think they're operating at peak time when it's busiest, so they're very prone to any of those peak conditions. I think we will see some fluctuations in the upcoming quarter, and like for example, the opening of the Burnside Expressway Connector Road, I think is going to change a number of those where we're seeing some improvements in schedule adherence right now. The other thing about on-time performance, if perhaps too much detail, but the performance is measured between the time points. So for some routes, there may be many time points 10 minutes apart. So though it's not every bus stop, it's all the multiple time points. The data is a bit dependent on how many time points they are and where those are and what they mean. So for example, for the Route 1, between Bridge Terminal and Mumford, there's not a place where, because it's on street the entire time, where we get the bus to hold, and there's not a lot of time points there. With the expresses, one of the interesting dynamics is that we don't hold Scotia Square inbound in the morning, right? Because you're so close to your final destination, no one's waiting there to get it. So some of that data is a bit interesting in that we schedule it really tight to go past there because we actually don't want a lineup of expresses sitting at Scotia Square. If they are running early, we want them to finish their trip and move on. So that's a little bit of the dynamic there. And so we do have a few what we call suppressed time points throughout the network that can impact the data. And I think that's a little bit of it with the expresses, particularly with the Cogswell project this year. But I can look into that closer to see if there's something else nuanced there that's happening with this quarterly report. In terms of the safety and collisions, I'm going to get one of my friends to come up here.
Good afternoon. I'm Stuart McDonald. I'm the Acting Director for Employee Support and Development. So to answer I think the question was about getting industry standards for comparables to our collision rates.
Yes.
And that is something that we're looking into. There is a current report forthcoming that will include that information. So that is something we can reach out to comparable industry partners across Canada and see what kind of standards or numbers they're able to provide us and match them to us. So this is something we're currently looking into.
Are we currently measuring it the same way everyone else does, or do we have to standardize our measurements?
Thank you. I believe the current measurement is per kilometer driven. So again, that's something we're going to look into further, and we will have that included in that report.
Okay. And I guess the final one was just if we can report incidents involving staff and passengers.
Reporting incidents involving staff and passengers. How many incidents are occurring in the KPI reporting? Yes. So what type of incidents? Just to clarify, like just all incidents or all interactions between just if we're looking to capture that?
I think any safety-related incidents or incidents of harassment or violence.
Okay. That's something we can certainly look at if it's not already included in the KPI reports and see if how we're capturing that and how we can measure that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If no one objects, I have just a few things from here. The first, yay Halifax Go. It's the only way that I use transit now. And the other added benefit that I found when I was at the FCM conference in Calgary is they clearly have the same vendor, because when I downloaded their app, it's like, oh, I recognize all of this. So it was very easy and quickly to understand their app, because it was absolutely almost a carbon copy of our one. So that was an added benefit. Happy to see, I kind of just crunched the ferry numbers just now. I know that the ferry was a little bit slower to bounce back from COVID, but it looks like they were 92%, 97% of the 2019 ridership. So that was really good to see that. I wanted to ask about schedule adherence. So when you reference making changes to the routes is that essentially just saying, well, it's taking us longer to drive this route, we're going to adjust the schedule to now make the route longer, so that it then adheres to the longer schedule, thus building in the basic, the degradation of the service actually gets built into the system? Am I correct in what happens there with schedule adherence adjustments?
That is primarily what happens. There are some cases where between two time points we have too much time and then not enough. So some of it is shifting it around, not just longer, but quite often it is more time needed.
I almost feel like we should have, if we're talking about data, there should almost be a metric of like, well, what is the reasonable time for a bus to be moving between places? I mean, I know that would not be something you could do on quickly, since obviously speed limits are different in different places depending on conditions. But I feel like, if we're moving the yardstick, suddenly like, okay, well now we've improved our schedule adherence, but the whole system is slower and we're not necessarily capturing that is maybe problematic. And something maybe we could take away to think about. The other one I just wanted to ask is underperforming routes. What's the process look like there? I mean, we're all kind of focused on budget right now and making sure, we all have, there's limited dollars and making sure we're deploying that appropriately. What's the process look like for like the routes that have got yellow and red on them in terms of not meeting the boardings?
Sure. So it would be our intent to look at those as part of the upcoming core service plan this year. So that would be any tweaks, and if it makes sense to adjust times, move a route, do something to improve performance, or if it makes sense to reduce trips, we would be looking at that as part of optimizing the network in this multi-year plan.
Okay. I think there's reasons to think about these things in terms of service versus coverage, right? Like, sometimes you want to run a bus just to give people an option, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And, as I look at the chart there and there's like 8 people riding in an hour from Porter's Lake, that's an awfully expensive service for 8 people an hour. Anyway, that's it for me. I thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just in response to your other comment related to the overall schedule adherence of the system, one of the metrics we do have is generally overall transit using bus stops travels at approximately 19 kilometers per hour. And I think that that is one more global metric we can look at and report on from quarter to quarter, year to year. Has the overall average speed network wide decreased? So that is something we can add for future if it'll be by fractions of a kilometer. But I think we can show kind of a longer scale track of network wide what the performance is that way. And the other thing, if you'll indulge me, is I did get a heat map of the Route 3 in the last minute here, and a lot of the schedule adherence challenges are along North Street headed to the bridge terminal, with a little bit near Highfield Terminal and Albro Park or Albro Lake Drive, but it's largely a North Street issue. So I just wanted to close that loop. Sorry.
I've got a separate email to send to you folks in Public Works from Tony and Mancini and I, firsthand experience being in the car on Gottingen Street with some observations for you, but we'll take that one offline. Thank you all. No one else on the board, so thank you, Transit, for being in here today and answering all our questions. Next up would be active transportation 13.2.1, prioritization of sidewalks in Cherrybrook. my mic. I know this is your area, Councillor Purdy, but I'm wondering if Councillor Young, whether or not you might want to put this on just where you are our representative on active transportation standing committee, and could maybe speak to the discussion if you were there at that meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. The motion is that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to request a staff report on prioritizing construction sidewalks or multiple use pathways within the Cherrybrook community. That's it.
Second by Councillor Purdy. Councillor Young.
Yes, I was at that meeting with the Active Transportation, and they did a walk through there, and what happened was they were assessing the need for active transportation in the area based on the proximity from the school, the church, and with traffic as well. Right now, I believe there's transit there right now from staff, but it's very, very unsafe to walk that portion of the road. So sidewalks or multi-use pathway were some of the suggestions from the community itself.
Thank you, Councillor. So next would be Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was able to attend that meeting too, just to hear what everyone had to say. And it was an interesting conversation from the standpoint of the members of the Active Transportation Advisory Committee were very frustrated because from their point of view, like, why hasn't this been done already? And I was just going to ask David, like, I didn't want to chime in because I'm not a member of the committee, but just to say, like, this isn't a very expensive project. Normally in these situations, there'd be an area rate for the residents, but that is, from what I believe, not going to happen with this particular community because we have special circumstances. The type of infrastructure that would need to be built here because of the stormwater runoff, the ditches, this is like the Cadillac version, I guess, of sidewalks because of all of the considerations that would need to be made. So this is very expensive. We do need funding help from other orders of government for this. I was surprised that there wasn't as much because I feel like some of the facts around this would have alleviated some of the frustration, which I totally get and understand, and I would be the same. And then also the priorities of sidewalks in our municipality. So obviously denser areas with, high-speed vehicles and where might take a higher priority when we're looking at the whole scheme of things in the municipality. There's just so many considerations, and I'm just wondering, is that information provided to the committee at any point? Like all of the considerations that come to me, because it does change the flavor of the whole conversation when all the facts are put out on the table for everyone to see, and it's, oh, okay, like there's more of an understanding around why things haven't happened right away. So just wonder if you could speak to that. Like what is the process for that, for the honest conversation and all of the facts to be laid out to say, okay, these are all the considerations. Like, how does that happen?
Work with that. Good afternoon. My name is David McIsaac. I'm the manager of the Active Transportation Program, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So first of all, Community of Cherrybrook is within the urban tax boundary. So the tax rate that they pay means that they are eligible for sidewalks. So to look at a sidewalk in a community like Cherrybrook, we wouldn't be looking at the area rate. That would be more for rural communities. So we've got about anywhere between 150 to about 150 kilometers a road in the entire municipality that we've looked at, that we've said is sort of high need for new sidewalks. We can build about 2 kilometers a year at current budgets, so it's going to take a while to get to all of those places. Cherrybrook's a community that we've been in a few times, talking to residents about sidewalks there. We've rated that as high need. It's a place, it's got transit with stops in a ditch.
Exactly.
It's a community that's about 1 kilometer, from the high school and the community center there, the Black Cultural Center. So there's destinations there. Like you said, it's the $3 million a kilometer kind of sidewalk there, because that's probably worst case, but because in addition to building the sidewalk on the top, we need to build the curbs and probably would need to build the stormwater drainage underneath.
Yes, that's what I've been told. Yeah.
So right now, it's definitely one of those places we've identified. I think you're right that if we were to prioritize it, to build it, cost sharing would go a long way, because we just don't have the money in the new sidewalk budget for these big projects.
Okay.
Fair.
And I have 26 seconds. And your team is looking for, actively looking for funding opportunities through, is that correct? Or is that through another department in HRM?
Definitely participate. It would be our team that would definitely participate in looking at that. I think probably the next step for this project is to do a bit more design work.
Oh, okay.
I think it's probably a little bit too early to, go out hat in hand to some of these funding programs. We need to sort of, for example, make sure that we do actually need to build that stormwater piping underneath, confirm location. So, this would be one that I would talk to the design group, or see if we have some capacity in-house to at least get to a 30% design.
Okay.
And that would help kind of confirm the direction. But, we're looking at this, with the other 154 kilometers of high need sidewalk. But this is one that has generally ranked a bit higher on the list, that we were hoping to get some money to build it as a standalone project. Probably that's not going to happen. But anyway, we can lay it out in the report, but I think the next step for this one is to do a bit more design work.
Excellent. Very happy to hear it's moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the report going to identify the population living in a walking distance from the school? Is that something that's going to be looked at? Because I actually called the school and only 5 students walk to the school.
Through Mr. Chair, the councillor, we can include that in the information. We kind of outline some of the reasons that it is prioritized, and pedestrian trips would be one of the factors. One of the reasons they may not be walking to the school right now is because it's not a very good place to walk.
No, I understand.
So that's
I understand.
one of the things that we'll think about.
But the person I talked to at the school felt that there weren't a lot of people within a walking distance, even if there was a sidewalk. So is that should be something that we look at, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the main factors.
Okay. And then what about the shoulders? Apparently the shoulders are very poorly maintained or non-existent in parts of the road. So is that a provincial responsibility, or it's ours?
It's
HRM's.
Yeah.
So is that part of the project as well, trying to rebuild those shoulders?
No, not directly, because it's not kind of directly related to new sidewalks, but that's something we can look at in the report, just as an alternative. Maybe in the interim, before some money shows up, there's a way to widen those shoulders a bit.
Well, it might support the transit riders as well.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Young, do you want to go now? You put the motion on.
Oh, no.
Close if you wish.
I'll wait for Council.
All right, we'll go to Councillor Purdy next then.
Thank you. And just on that, Councillor Morse, with the school, there's a community room in the school that the Lakeland Cherrybrook Business Development Association has a kind of a contract with to use. So it's not just the school that is used by children, but also by members of the community for meetings and stuff that would provide safe pedestrian access to there. There's also a church, very loved used church, that this sidewalk would go to, because that would be like the highest, I guess, pedestrian traffic between the school and the church for those various community uses. And also on the shoulder, I mean, this has been the bane of my existence. We can't put a bench at a transit stop for a lot of the elderly folks that use transit. We can't put a shelter there because there's just no room. So, I mean, this would benefit transit just as much as pedestrian. And a couple of years ago, tragically, we did have a school-age girl hit by a car, which upped the priority of this area to be, she got off the school bus. So she wasn't a walker to school, but to get off the school bus to walk, she was hit by a vehicle. So she survived, but of course it was tragic and horrible. Should not have happened. So there are all of those considerations too that go towards this, but I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. It would help with our transit, making transit more comfortable, more safe for the folks that use it in the community as well. Thank you.
Councillor Young to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To close, I just want to add a little bit to that, to ask David if there's any provincial funding monies through active transportation that could be put towards that as well.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, at this time, no. There hasn't been a recent call for example, infrastructure applications or that sort of thing. But I think, like I said, it's not even really ready to put forward for an application. We should do a bit more design work before we kind of submit it, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So I asked the Transportation Standing Committee to support this, please, because I think one of many communities in the African Nova Scotia communities are without these essential services and safety, and this is a safety issue as well. So I would like for the committee to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just briefly say I agree wholeheartedly on that, and I think we also have to reflect decades worth of infrastructure decisions about why these things don't exist in these communities in the first place. So with that, I think question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? So that carries unanimously. Colleagues, we do have 3 items left, and it's 10 to 3. What is the appetite to extend hypothetically to 3:30 if we need to? Everyone okay with that? I'm seeing heads. Could I get a motion from someone to extend to 3:30? Moved by Councillor Cleary, second by Councillor Cuddle. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so we're extended to 3:30. We'll see if we actually need the time. So next up would be motions. So Councillor Cleary, 14.1.
I'll try to be as quick as possible. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a report investigating a policy allowing councillors to use district capital funds to purchase a limited number of mobile speed display signs for use within their districts as traffic feedback, monitoring, reporting devices over and above the current SDSs that are now in use within traffic management.
Second by Councillor Cuddle. Go ahead, Councillor Cleary.
I'll be very quick. So this is one where I talked to our Executive Director for Public Works about this kind of issue. I wanted to buy one specifically around Mumford Road for St. Agnes Junior High. And because I believe each district has kind of roughly 2 boards that staff place, and this has had a history between police and our staff, and now our staff do it. And I know that there's a cost to the boards themselves. There's a cost, I think, licensing and other things that go with them, repair cost, maintenance. People have to go in and check them, install them, take them out. And so given that, if I was to buy one, then another counselor would find out, well, I'll buy one, and then I'll buy one, and pretty soon you've got 30, 40, 50 boards out there that our staff are not resourced to maintain. So reluctantly, I agreed that probably developing a policy framework, if we're going to allow this sort of thing, is the best way to go. That's the most fair thing, and also manages the resources for our staff better. And so that's the intent behind this, is to look at, is it possible for each counselor over and above that to purchase one or two, however many we decide, if we decide, and then what rules would be placed around that, and then of course what resources might be necessary in order to maintain those. So I hope you support this, and I hope it comes back to us in relatively good timing, so that we can go ahead and do it. But anyway, I won't prejudge it. I'll wait and see what staff bring back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clary. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary, for putting this on the agenda today. I have a bit of a memory about this. When I was first elected, Councillor Mancini had purchased a few with his capital district funds and told me about that, and I went to inquire about how do I purchase one. And then was told no, that there was a policy change coming where we weren't allowed. So there already seems to be some decision that was made in some policy that we were no longer allowed to purchase them. And at that time, there were a couple that did exist within West Division. Actually, it was the policing division, and they would rotate them around the districts, and it was a super valuable tool. I did work with HRP, getting data on areas where I was getting like a high number of complaints around speeding, and it was interesting because we would go and put up the sign. The police would put it up, and then they could actually go and download the data, and then the data could be used in more real time to figure out when they needed enforcement. So an example is I had a street, and it was determined that the speeding was all taking place between like 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which was a bit of like, a mystery until we got that data and we were able to pinpoint it with a particular institution on that road that got let out between 2 and 3. And we're able to target the enforcement and effectively address the situation. When I believe it's, I don't know quite who controls it. I think it went to planning and development for some reason, or is it with you, Lucas? Are they with you now? So the whole process of being able to work with the traffic authority to be able to place those signs in areas where we're receiving complaints and working with the police around enforcement is kind of a bit of a mystery now, and in how to do that. And right now we don't have photo radar. We have police enforcement, and we don't have a lot of capacity in our policing enforcement to deal with speeding. And so if there are tools and mechanisms that can help us better enforce speed limits, then I'm all for it, because it's become a challenge. And when I talk to the police officers in my district, it's a challenge for them too. And so I think Councillor Purdy used the word nimble several times earlier in the meeting, and I think there is a nimbleness to this that needs to be considered. And right now, I feel we've lost that nimbleness for it to be an effective tool in that way. I'm sure they're serving other purposes, but in regards to that one in specific, traffic enforcement, they were useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I see both staff were at attention. This is only a request for a staff report. If there's something you'd like to volunteer, though,
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I just wanted to provide some information. So yes, we did take over the speed display signs and people refer to as the speed boxes, radar boxes from police. A big part of that was at their request. They didn't want to have their members out there using their time to be putting these up. Plus, they were seeing injuries to their police officers as they were working putting these up. So we took them the inventory they had, and we do use them for the same purpose police were using them for as well. So we'll oftentimes get a request from police if we already have speed data, or if we don't, we can collect it for them. And we'll use the radar signs, or we have just radar data collectors that don't look like a sign, so nobody would even know it was there. So you're able to get a good profile on what the speed is through the time of day. So we've done that right up until now, and oftentimes we'll collect our own data for other purposes. Might be traffic calming, might be whatever. And if we notice a specific time of day, we've actually reached out to police and asked for some targeted enforcement and asked them, say, it seems to be about this time of the day. Could you, see if you can get some patrols over that area? So we are actually doing that on an ongoing basis.
I think. Okay, go ahead. I think Lucas wants to volunteer something as well.
Through the chair to the councillor, just to add what Roddy said. So we essentially have that program still. Maybe we haven't communicated it as well as we should have. And we also take lots of suggestions from councillors. So feel free to contact us and with your suggestions. If you hear of a hotspot, we do get those suggestions all the time and move them to accommodate those needs.
Does planning and development have any? Are they all with you? Because I've tried. I just don't feel that maybe it's communication, maybe it's a policy, maybe it's a process that needs to be communicated. Because I feel that that direct contact has been lost, and it would be valuable to have back.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So planning and development would not be administering anything to do with speed display signs or gathering speeds for police purposes. Do they have some data collectors? Most likely, and they probably use them for collecting traffic volume and whatnot for their planning purposes in their own projects, but they wouldn't necessarily be involved with interfacing with police for enforcement like we do. As far as a process or whatever to maybe kind of have some of that data taken, collected, and then liaise with police, you can reach out to my team. We look after that. So my team looks after that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't remember if it was during budget, but did somebody say that these do not impact speed at all? Like it just shows the spot. Yeah, there's no. I'll support this. That's fine. It's good. Yeah, it doesn't impact speed. But just on the note of police, the RCMP, some RCMP places have citizens on patrol groups, and we do have these signs that they will put out if ours are duly occupied in other areas. They will go put it out, and they take the data, and then it helps to inform traffic, enforcement with RCMP to know where the hot spots are and at what times of day. So very thankful for that program. We have really good volunteers out there that do this on their own time because they believe in community safety. So happy to support this, but it doesn't impact the speed of vehicles. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question maybe for Lucas. Actually, it's two. Who decides on the location of the signs itself, and how long are they in place?
Through the chair to the councillor. So we, like Roddy and I previously stated, so we get recommendations from counselors and from the police themselves and from the RCMP on putting them in specific locations. And, typically they're in that location for months, sometimes longer, depending on the situation and the demand for moving them. So to quote Councillor Purdy, we try and be quite nimble with them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just quickly note from here before going back to Councillor Cleary to close. I think it was Councillor Russell. I don't think it was Councillor Craig. I remember when new on the job, this one I'm pretty sure it was Councillor Russell, just chatting with him, he was talking about moving the speed display sign, because I think it was through the RCMP, and he himself was physically going and choosing locations and setting it up, and it seemed this is a very strange extra duties as required thing for a councillor to be taking on directly. So I think a bit of a policy look at this is a very good idea, Councillor Cleary. So we'll go back to you to close.
Thank you. And I just wanted to clear something up. So if you do a little bit of research on speed display signs, they actually do reduce speeds. TransCanada Traffic indicates that they reduce speed on average by 10%. A Fisher et al. Study, so this is from, it's American, it's the NHTSA, but the source is Fisher et al. 2021, so fairly recent meta-analysis. Automated speed display monitors also provide a method to collect location-specific data. A meta-analysis of dynamic speed display feedback devices found that these devices are an effective tool for reducing speed at installations, locations, in different roadway contexts, etc. And this is from our own website, halifax.ca, in our traffic road safety section, under the headline Speed Display Signs. Our own website. Also known as driver feedback signs, speed display signs are devices designed to reduce speeding by alerting motorists of their speed. So we have actual data, and our own website says they reduce speeds. Just to clarify. Thank you.
Councillor Purdy.
Am I going to get the last word? Because you can't buzz in again. You're two. Okay, I just want to say, I can't remember who said it, but was it during budget? I think somebody had said that. I have not done research.
I think it was Brad Anguish.
Was it Brad Anguish, our commissioner?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to just have that last word for the first time in my life with Cleary. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, colleagues. Question? Question has been called. All in favor? All opposed? That's done. Okay. Moving to the next one, which is Councillor Purdy. Oh, no, we've already done that.
No.
Yes.
Purdy's
that's done. So moving along in camera, we don't have any minutes. We do have a personnel matter. Do we want to try that? Do we need to go in camera, Ms. Clerk? No? Okay. Although the board was in, who? Councillor Purdy.
Well, there you go. Quick on the draw. Okay, take these off. I move that the standing committee may rise. No, I don't. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee can approve the direction provided in the in-camera report. And that it be, oh, is it on my screen? I'm sorry. Sorry, folks. I was looking at my paper copy. That we, number one, approve the direction provided in the private and confidential report dated February 19th, 2025, and two, direct that the private and confidential report dated February 19th, 2025 be maintained private and confidential. So moved.
Second by Councillor Morris. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? That carries. Okay, colleagues, so we have no added items. Any notices of motion today? None. Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Take notice that at a future meeting of Halifax Regional Council, I intend to move a motion to request an information report on parking enforcement capacity to respond to after-hours calls related to illegal parking on transit routes in residential neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Take notice that at the next meeting of Transportation Standing Committee to be held on March 27, 2025, I intend to move the following: that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the CAO to provide a staff report on options for seasonal transit to a beach or beaches along the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other notices of motion, the date of our next meeting is March 27th. I would take a motion to adjourn.